It is a great honor and privilege that today I get to have on the Connection Codes podcast, Sharon McMahon. Sharon is America's government teacher, the leader of the self-proclaimed Governors, who I have proudly been a part of since 2020. And she is an educator who teaches people American history and government. She creates a safe space online where people can ask questions and get fact-based information. She's also the writer, the author of The Small and the Mighty, which is the new New York Times best-selling book featuring 12 ordinary citizens, American citizens, that played an integral role in shaping America. Today, we're going to be talking about the role that fear and emotions play on our history and how we show up today. We're going to be talking about how to do the next needed thing and what that means. And I am so honored to be able to host her. She also, I want to acknowledge, she has raised millions of dollars to relieve medical debt for people, for hurricane victims. She is a doer. And so I am so overjoyed to introduce you to Sharon McMahon. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in our relationships and in ourselves. I am your host, Tera, and our company is founded by Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill, and the Connection Codes is the guide to human connection. And we're so glad you're here. Sharon, oh my gosh, one of the best things about having a podcast is that you get to meet the people that you admire, the people that you really look up to, that more than likely you wouldn't have a chance to meet otherwise. And you are for sure one of those people. For me, I found you, like many people, back in 2020 when you turned the camera on your phone, on Instagram, and started teaching government to America. You're America's government teacher. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey and what even started that moment where you said, I'm going to get on here and do this? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for being an OG, Tera. That's so nice. And I totally know what you mean about one of the joys of having a podcast is that you have an occasion to invite somebody to talk to you. I do that all the time where I'm like, I'm so excited to talk to this person. And normally if I were to just call them and be like, who do you want to talk to me for a little while? That's experienced is like, that's weird. You're a stranger. You know what I mean? But when you have a podcast, it gives you a chance to invite somebody. So that happens to me all the time. And I appreciate hearing that I'm one of those people for you. So that's very sweet. In terms of how I got started, the 2020 election was the height of the global pandemic before we had invented any treatments for COVID, before there were antibodies or vaccines or whatever. And it was also the height of a very contentious presidential election. As you know, everybody was home. All the kids were home from school, or a lot of them were. Everybody's online, an extreme amount. And I started noticing that there were a lot of people who were very confidently wrong on the interwebs, proclaiming things as gospel that were demonstrably false and not matters of opinion. For example, the Electoral College is not a university one can graduate from. Right? That's not my opinion. Okay. You can have an opinion on whether we should use the Electoral College, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, but it's not your opinion about whether or about how it works. Those are just facts, right? So I started noticing this being a rampant problem. And there was a genesis moment where a man was commenting on a post on Facebook on one of my friend's posts, and he was talking about how the Electoral College was a school you could graduate from and that the office was near the White House. Which you're just making this up, my dude. Okay. There's no Electoral College office. It's a concept. It's not a facility or a university. So I sort of decided in that moment I could either take all of my knowledge that I'd gained from a long time as a government teacher, and I could either argue with strangers in the comments, on the book of faces, or I could start making some little nonpartisan explainer videos, not telling you which candidate to vote for or whether or not you should like the Electoral College, but just how it works. Because turns out it's really hard to have an educated opinion about something with no education on that topic. How would I have an educated opinion on whether or not I should get a heart surgery unless I have some education on what the heart surgery is and what it's supposed to do for me, right? So this concept is true of many things. How do we have educated opinions with no education? So that's always been my goal. I view my role as that of educator, and I'm still doing it 4 years later. Turns out not everybody learned everything there was to know over the last 4 years.
Yes. Well, I love you do create a safe space for questions like that. Like, what is the Electoral College? You often will put up a Q&A question and air where people can write like, what is the role of the president? Or what does the attorney general do? And you answer in a way that's never demeaning. It's never like, oh, poor you that didn't listen to your government teacher in 11th grade. But you answer like, this is what it is. It's very fact-based. And you are so safe because you come from a perspective of helping people see each other and not like you're wrong and this is why you're wrong. It's definitely not an argumentative space, but it's very safe. And I absolutely love following you. So if you don't already follow Sharon, I'm going to have all of her links in the show notes. But I want to dive into this book, this incredible gift that you have given to the world, your new book, The Small and the Mighty, where you follow the stories of 12 ordinary American citizens that change the course of history. It is people that aren't necessarily the headline in the textbook or the presidents, but they played a massive role in how we as Americans show up today and the laws that have been made and how we function as a society. So one of the things that you say in the book is that it is hard to hate someone up close. That's what they say. And whenever I heard that, because I've listened and I've read on my Kindle, whenever I first heard that, I was like, oh, I needed to hear this again. Like, it is hard to hate someone up close. And at the Connection Codes, we teach people how to regulate their emotions and process them and share them to communicate. We do that by seeing each other at our core and sharing. And so we like to start each podcast by getting up close with each other and as safe as we can with our audience and share the core emotions of what's happening with us. And so do you feel comfortable in doing the core emotion wheel with me today?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. Well, I will share that with you and I will start just to demonstrate what that looks like. And then we will go from there. So for me, I feel anger. I feel anger that, oh my gosh, like you said, the misrepresentation, all of the false information that is out in the world. I feel so much anger at that when I see it spreading. I feel shame. I feel shame because I have tools that help people get to the fear. We're going to talk a lot about fear today and the role it's played in history. And I have tools that can help people understand their fear so they're not living in it, making decisions from it. I feel guilt. I actually feel guilt today. My husband has done a lot around the house over the last few days and I haven't been as proactive. Like, he ordered the groceries, he's cleaned the house, and so I feel guilt over everything that he has done to help carry our family this week. I feel fear. I feel fear because we are living in times where we are operating from fear and we're in a very fear-centric stage of life. And so just fear of what that outcome of that will be. I feel lonely that I care. There are so many people that judge people that care about politics or world matters. And I do care. And that can be a lonely place to be because I feel judged. I feel sad. I feel sad over the division that our country is in. I feel hurt. I feel hurt. Ooh, hurt is sharp pain. I feel hurt that my husband and I had a moment 2 nights ago where we were having some friction with each other and just that we were missing each other. And I feel hurt when we miss each other because we have tools to not do that. And I feel so much joy. One, I feel joy in getting to meet you today and getting to know you. personally, but then also I feel joy in the gift that you have given us. This book is so hopeful, and it's helped me realign my purpose and remember to not be a cynic, but to be a doer. Like that is what we are called to do. And so I feel joy in that.
That's so sweet. Thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Is it my turn?
It's your turn. Yes. And you can start with any emotion. You don't have to go in order, whatever is firing for you, either a recent or a big emotion.
Let me think here. I feel anger about the number of people who are intentionally misleading others on the internet in an effort to sow discord and division. That makes me angry. It always has, and it continues to do so. Talking about shame is like a feeling of embarrassment for something. I recently, I've said this before, we're not really so much afraid of failure as we are of other people watching us fail. It's not so much that we're afraid of tripping on the stairs as we are other people laughing at us when we trip on the stairs. There have been times recently where I've felt like, oh my gosh, that is such an oversight or such an embarrassment that I didn't realize that thing. I recently mistakenly posted a picture of the wrong person on the internet and attributed some facts to this person that were not incredibly flattering. And then realized later that I had used a picture of the wrong person. By the way, they have the same name, okay? So it wasn't like I Googled Charles Darwin and came up with a picture of Albert Einstein. You know what I mean? Like they have the same name. And it was not an intentional mistake, but nevertheless, the result of my actions, that was an embarrassing mistake on my part. I felt embarrassed that I had not given like the correct information. In terms of guilt, I just wrapped a giant book tour. And that is also connected to my joy experience. It was incredibly joyful to be able to be in a room with thousands of other governors. As you know, for the past 4 years, I've been talking alone in a room to a reflection of myself on the telephone. You know what I mean? So to be able to be there in real life was an incredibly joyful experience. But then on the other hand, I felt guilt about leaving my family for such an extended period of time, particularly my husband, who had to pick up a lot of slack, and my youngest child, who really misses me when I'm gone. This is the kind of child who still at age 12 would love to sleep in my bed every night. That's how attached she is to me. And I know she really missed me. And so I felt kind of guilty about having to leave her for a while. Yeah. In terms of fear, one of the things that I do, I've had like an increasing amount of fear surrounding is my own personal, like physical safety. When I am traveling and publicizing my whereabouts, listen, I'm not a reactionary. I'm not a catastrophizer. I'm not somebody who sees danger lurking in the shadows in every corner. I'm not somebody who's like, but I might be kidnapped at every moment of every day. So for the fact that I'm saying this is 4 years of a slow build, if that makes sense, about questioning whether or not it continues to be safe to publicize my whereabouts when I'm doing a public appearance. To what extent do I need personal security to make sure that everything is okay? I'm not afraid of governors, and I'm certainly not afraid of your audience. These are truly incredible people who I know would never harm me. But those aren't the only people that are watching and listening, right? Therein lies one of the challenges of the interwebs, is how anonymous people can be and how easy it is to click follow and to obtain information about you. And so that's just something that's been on my radar recently of like, when I was on book tour, I had lots of security, in part because venues provide lots of security. I had a whole team surrounding me. I never went anywhere alone. And now that tour is over and my tour team has kind of gone back to their other jobs, it's just been one of those things that has been coming up in my mind. In terms of loneliness, it is difficult to work in a job that is in many ways peerless. I don't have coworkers in the sense of other people doing the same job that I'm doing. I certainly have team members that work for me. And in that sense, I have people to talk to during the day even though we all work remotely. But nevertheless, mine is a very unique job. It's difficult to convey to other people sometimes exactly what it is and what kind of toll it takes and what it requires on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. So it can feel lonely in that sense. In terms of sadness, one of the things that makes me feel sad, of course, it's not hard to feel sad. All you have to do is turn on the news. It'll give you plenty of things to feel sad about. But I've recently felt very sad for people who have lost everything in a hurricane. I'm thinking about like Hurricane Helene, how devastated I would be to lose everything I owned, or to lose a family member, or to lose a pet, or a business that I'd worked so hard for, or even all my family pictures. Like, I feel tremendous sadness for something so widespread and devastating. And then in terms of hurt, one of the things that has and continues to hurt me is the willingness on the part of certain communities to personally attack me, to send me AI-generated pictures of myself being assaulted, to repost my pictures in their groups. And the part that I think is particularly hurtful is that very often, in fact, the overwhelming majority of the time, the groups that are responsible for this overtly belong to faith communities. And I find it especially hurtful that people who would simultaneously sort of proclaim their faith of whatever kind it is in their Instagram bio are also telling me that they hope I die or I should kill myself or whatever it is. That's actually very hurtful. And I think their intention is to be hurtful. They know that's what they're doing, and it does hurt. And I've spoken about this openly before, that it's hurtful to see, especially people who have guiding principles to which they are supposed to subscribe, act in ways that are not at all in accordance with those principles. And that's just leaving aside the human aspect of like, nobody wants to be told to go kill themselves. So that's my core emotion wheel.
Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that so vulnerably. I think that it is a great reminder for everyone. It makes you human. And people that are sending and creating these things, like, they don't see others as human. They don't see the humanness in people. And so many of us experience those emotions every day, all day, every day. We're experiencing fear and shame and hurt. And so to hear someone that we all admire at such a high level to know, like, oh, you're experiencing these things too. And then also, like, how can we rally around? Like, how can we see you even better? And so thank you for sharing that. We know with the connection codes that emotions play a very important role in how we are showing up and how history has been written. And one of the things I loved about reading your book is I can see the moments where fear had hit a community and the way that they reacted and created discrimination and judgment and harshness. And you say in the book that fear is the most powerful motivator of human behavior. I am very aware that today many people are living in great fear, and fear was weaponized against us for the last several months leading into this election. And I would even say that most people, when they cast their vote, fear was a motivator in that moment on both sides. So knowing that history repeats itself and knowing that you have many stories of how fear played a role in these movements, how do you see fear as the motivator today, and what impact do you think that it's having?
It's a great question. You can see in both candidates the fear-based messaging. And that's because, as you said, fear is the single greatest motivator of human behavior. We, of course, have very strong self-preservation instincts. We want to stay alive. Even toddlers have strong self-preservation instincts. So fear motivates us to get up off the couch far more quickly than even a message of love does. The fear of losing something you love is tremendous. So you can see this. I'll give examples sort of from both sides. From the Harris campaign, the primary messaging being, we are not going back. Right? This idea that what was in the past is something that we should be afraid of, and we are not going to go back to that. You can see that with Trump messaging, even the phrase MAGA. is, make America great again, is rooted in fear. It's a fear of what the perception of America is today. And that, in fact, we do need to go back to some undefined point in history when America was great. And those are just two very small examples. I could talk for 2 hours about fear-based messaging in the election. So don't get me started, Tera, but those are just two off the top of my head examples. Yet both of those examples speak to either a fear of the past, meaning like we can't go back to what we had, or a fear of the future, that we need to make America great again like it was in the past because the future is scary. Obviously, Trump was more successful in that messaging, which is one of the reasons he won the election. He's better at messaging that fear and using that fear to motivate people to vote. And this is, again, as I said, the most motivating thing humans can use. So whoever is better at motivating fear in their followers or potential voters often ends up being the victor when it comes to an election. And I know many people listening to this will be like, but why can't we run elections based on positive ideas? Why can't we say, here are my policy proposals. Here's how I want to make the country better. Why can't we have an election in which both candidates are not using fear-based messaging? And, to that, I would say, yeah, that would be nice. It would be nice if we did not spend all of our time doing fear-based messaging. But the fact is you cannot outrun human psychology. They continue to use fear-based messaging because fear-based messaging works. If you have one candidate who is running totally leaning hard into fear and the other one who is leaning hard into inspiration for the future, the candidate running hard on inspiration in the future is at a tactical disadvantage. Doesn't mean they can't win, but they are at a tactical disadvantage because of the way the human mind is wired.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I really noticed as well is as you talk about fear back in those days which I say back in those days, really what I love about your book is it really doesn't feel that long ago. As you're telling the dates and some of the people are still alive today, I was like, oh my gosh, it really wasn't that long ago. And I'm curious what you would want to say in those moments to the Japanese Exclusion League or the people opposing the suffragette movement where they were acting out of fear. What would you want to say to those people now that we're in hindsight, now that we're on the other side of those moments? What would you wish we could go back and speak into those moments?
At its core, this hits exactly what you were just saying, that we are willing to send hate messages because we don't view other people as fully human. Even though our conscious mind might not be willing to admit that, you might be verbally saying like, of course they're human. But subconsciously, we view them as beneath us. That's why it's so easy to I'm saying other in air quotes, other a group to which we do not belong. Those people are doing this thing. Those people, whatever that group is, those suffrage workers, those people who have Japanese ancestry, in Germany, those Jews, in other countries, it's some other ethnic minority, people who belong to the Communist Party, like those people. Our brains are excellent at making connections between things, and our brains are excellent at creating shortcuts. This is one of the reasons humans have adapted to all different kinds of things, is we're good at it. The sad part about this, though, is that dehumanization, which is what we're fundamentally describing here, the even subconscious belief that some other group is beneath you, has never led a country or a group anywhere worth going. And if, I was a time traveler and could show them exactly the effect of their actions, maybe I would, but maybe there'd be some kind of butterfly effect. You've seen all the time travel movies. They'll inevitably screw up the future, right? But nevertheless, the message that I would want to hammer home in 1930s Germany, in 1940s America, in, 19-teens America during the suffrage movement is that dehumanization, viewing another group, whether it's women, people of a different race, people of a different religion, has never led us somewhere positive. The outcomes are always negative. And it was true then, and it remains true today.
Yes. And that is really one of the reasons I wanted to ask that question, even because as I'm reading the book, I so see us there today. I see how we are pinned against each other, both from a religious perspective, but also very much just the Republican Democrats. It's become a you, they, them, those that oppose us kind of mindset. And so that also applies to today. And it's something that I have found myself even struggling with at my own core of being like, I can't be around you right now. Like, I don't feel safe with you. And I see that again and again on the internet of, I'm not coming to Thanksgivings. I'm not going to be in a relationship with people anymore. And I see their pain. I see their fear. But exactly what you're saying, it's the dehumanization. When we start pinning each other against each other, nothing good has ever come from that.
And this is not about working for an idea you believe in. This is not about advocating for the rights of the marginalized. This is not about people who fought against the rise of the KKK. That's not what we're talking about here. So when we're saying like pitting one group against each other, sometimes there is evil at work that must be thwarted, of course. But the difference is, if we're thinking about just using Nazi Germany as an example, I'm not saying anybody calling anyone a Nazi or saying that's where we are in the United States today, but just using it as an easy example that many people know about. The reason the Nazis were successful is because they were very good at othering the Jewish people, right? At painting them as less than human. It would, however, be wrong of us to say, I refuse to be in the presence of any Germans, because either in the past or maybe today, they have beliefs that I think of as very problematic. This is one of the things I talk about in the book, is that most of the important things that have happened in the world, especially legislatively, in terms of like the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, the 19th Amendment, things that have really impacted society for the better, they have only been possible because people were willing to work with their enemies. And that does not mean because you associate with somebody with whom you disagree that you adopt all of their beliefs as your own. It does not make you guilty by association. What it means is that politics cannot be a zero-sum game in which, in order for me to succeed, you must be destroyed. Important political objectives have almost always come from coalition building and from consensus building. Even if you, Tera, think, listen, I do not want another park. The park's too close to my house. I don't want a parking lot that close to my house. It's not a good idea. I hate it. And I'm like, but parks are amazing. And I don't care if you have a parking lot close to your house. Even if we fundamentally disagree on this topic, maybe we can both agree, though, that we should have safe bridges that don't collapse when people drive across them. Maybe we can work together on this bridge project, because the bridge in our town is not safe to drive across anymore. What is a mistake is for me to say, I refuse to work with Tera because we fundamentally disagree about the park. We work together where we can. And I talked about the coalitions that helped get suffrage across the finish line. In some cases, in places like in Oregon, there were coalitions of 32 different groups that worked together to get suffrage for women in the state of Oregon. And it doesn't mean that they all agreed. In fact, many ways they didn't. They were different immigrant groups, different ethnic groups, different religious groups, advocating for different kinds of policies. But nevertheless, they could agree that women should have a say in government. And this is something that I hear from people all the time, and it sounds like maybe you do too, which is they are struggling with, how am I supposed to be around somebody when I think that their morals are fundamentally opposed to my existence or are fundamentally opposed to what I believe and who I am? How am I supposed to be around, like, let's say you're a person of faith, and how are you supposed to be around somebody who thinks everybody who is a person of faith is automatically a serial killer? Or let's say you're in a same-sex relationship. How are you supposed to be around somebody who doesn't think you have the right to get married? How are we supposed to deal with this tension? And our inclination in today's society, because we have invented the technology to make this easy, is to delete, block, and unfriend those people on the internet. And consequently, we want to carry out that same action in our real lives. We want to delete, block, and unfriend people who we disagree with in real life as well. And that is a fast track to more division. That's a fast track to greater divides between us. Because to your point that you brought up, that we cannot hate each other up close. It's difficult to hate people up close. The farther apart we are, physically, emotionally, at the dinner table, in our hearts, the farther apart we are, the easier it is to hate. And so if you want to have a chance at bringing a person around to having less hate in their heart for a group that maybe you belong to or a moral position that you hold, if you want to have any hope of bringing that person around, the only real answer that science, psychology, sociology has come up with is your ability to influence them through a warm relationship. And that in some ways is kind of an infuriating answer because that's the hard way. It's the hard way. We want an easy button of like, but what's the easy answer of making it so people don't think that I don't have the right to exist? What's the easy button? Believe me, I would love an easy button. I would love for my job to not be getting hate messages on the internet. I would love that. I would love an easy button. But that's not the human experience. Our best hope is to influence people with whom we have a warm relationship.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. And that is something that we as connection coders stand by. And that's why this tool even exists, because if I'm in opposition, like I had conversations with people that are on the other side, what's happening with your fear? And when I can hear their fear, when I can hear their hurt, when I can hear these things about them, I can see them totally different. And then also for me, even at times, if I can recognize my fear, I'm like, ooh, okay, that's actually like not reality. Like I can speak the truth into the fear versus continuing to hammer forward from that place. And one of the other themes that you talk about in your book is the next needed move. And I love that thought for sure. And so I am curious with now where we are today, what would you see as like our next needed move as American citizens?
I love this idea too, that almost everybody in this book did not start out with some grand plan. They did not have like my 10-year plan to change the course of history is blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? They just kept doing the next needed thing. And this is a tool that is available to every single one of us. We don't have to wait for an invitation. We don't have to wait for the circumstances to be right. We don't have to wait until every single part of our plan clicks into place. We can just keep doing the next needed thing. And in terms of what Americans should be doing as the next needed thing, here is one of the beauties of this, is that I believe that we are all equipped and empowered to do different things in the world. And there is not one prescription I can give you of what the next needed thing is. And that's actually really good news. We're not all meant to be cardiologists. We're not all meant to be sanitation workers. We're not all meant to be teachers or podcast hosts. Each one of us has been given gifts for a reason. And I would argue that you have causes that are near and dear to your heart, whatever they are. Helping people regulate their emotions. That's a really important skill that too few adults have, Tera. Helping people understand how government works. That's a skill that I have developed over years of education and experience, right? But I would also argue that you have other causes that are really just like press on you or weigh on you. Maybe it's natural disasters. Maybe it's children in gun control. Kids have food insecurity. Maybe it's people who are living in oppressive regimes overseas. Like whatever it is, you have things that it's not that you don't care about all these other issues. It's that for whatever reason, that one just tugs at your heart in a way that it's difficult to describe. I would contend that those are things that you are supposed to work on. You can't work on everything. So you might as well work on the next needed thing that is immediately in front of you. It's because it's a cause you care about, or it's a cause that's in your own community. And I would also caution people against getting bogged down and overwhelmed by the enormity of the world's problems. It's very easy to feel that way. It's easy to feel like I'm just a little person who works in an insurance office. I'm just a person who answers the phone at a salon. Okay? Like, don't try to pretend that I'm out here fixing all the world's problems. It's very easy to feel that way. But when the problems of the world seem too big, it really helps to right size what your community actually means. We think of the problems of the world as being the problems of the 8 billion inhabitants of planet Earth. What if you are not, in fact, meant to impact 8 billion people? What if you are meant to impact the 24 second graders in front of you? What if you are, in fact, meant to impact the person on the other end of the telephone? What if, in fact, you are meant to impact the 2 patients to which you are assigned in the ICU today? What if we stop focusing on fixing all of the world's problems and we try doing for one person what we wish we could do for everyone? Some of us have really large platforms and know-how and connections that make us able to work on these really, really big picture issues. That is the job of some people. That's not to say that we shouldn't work on big picture issues like laws that need to be passed. Those are things that need to be worked on. But the idea that I can't solve hunger issues for 8 billion people, it's easy to do nothing when you feel like you can't fix it all. That's kind of like a human default. Have you heard this phrase from sales psychology that a confused mind says no? That if you are confused about what to do next, you're just going to be like, nope, I'm not going to do it. And I think that's true of how the rest of the world works too. How do I impact child hunger? I can't think of it, so I guess I'll do nothing. That's too often our solution for things. How about instead of trying to fix something for the entire world, we do for one person what we wish we could do for them all? If it's worth doing for everyone, it's worth doing for one person. Nobody would say to somebody who helped someone escape on the Underground Railroad, or somebody who helped someone escape occupied Berlin. No one would be like, well, you didn't end the war. You didn't stop enslavement worldwide, so your actions are meaningless. We would never say that to somebody else. In fact, we would be like, dang, that was incredible that you did that. But yet we're not willing to apply the same standard to ourselves. We think either fix it all or do nothing. So my encouragement would be, stop waiting for this one perfect thing to fall in your lap. Stop waiting for an answer to solve all of the world's problems or all of the country's problems, and start by doing what is immediately in front of you, the next needed thing. If it ends up being the wrong thing, then that actually is very valuable information too. You've learned what the wrong thing is, and you can take steps to avoid that wrong thing in the future, and you will have learned something worthwhile. So whatever it is for you in your community, you get to answer the question, what is the next needed thing?
Yeah, I love that so much. And saying that phrase as well helps call us to be a doer. You talk about the cynic versus the doer. And man, the conviction of hearing that was many people, it's easy to just get on and complain about something. And it feels good to do that, but you're not actually moving the needle forward. And so your focus on the next needed thing, that's an action that we take. And so I absolutely love that. In the conclusion of your book, you say, I'd want you to know that the great Americans aren't only people who existed long ago. Their faces captured on a frame of black and white film. Great Americans live. Whatever year you are reading this in, know that you are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses, people who see you and depend on your efforts. Our ancestors made a way in the wilderness for us, descendants they did not even know, but whose existence was assured. Wow, that is so powerful. And thinking about the small and the mighty, and that they were known for creating lasting change. And I'm curious for you, what is the change that you, when the book is written about you, what change is it that you want to say happened? What's your assignment, your mission?
Well, it's very ambitious of you to say that somebody will write a book about me someday. I don't know if that's true, but let's just assume for the sake of the argument that like it is true that when I'm long gone, 100 years from now, when people come across my work and like, oh yeah, did you know that one person that lived a long time ago? She had that one internet account. She wrote that one book that one time. I sometimes think about this, and I've written about this too, that we are all right now creating our own digital legacies. Today's individuals are not so much creating paper legacies, although some certainly are, in the same way that people of the past have. And how much that's going to change historians of the future, what it will look like to be able to access people's thoughts and feelings. Because there will be no letters left behind in a box to a university. All of our correspondence is digital now. But on the other hand, they will have access to a lot more of our thoughts and feelings if we were well known in our lifetimes. This is not true of people who were not well known in their lifetimes, but because they go on podcasts and they write about things in their newsletters and they have access to a lot of things that perhaps they wouldn't have in the past. But if I could be remembered for having done something good, which of course, who doesn't want to be remembered for that? Who wants to go to their grave being like, well, Tera was a jerk. Rest in peace, not. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the legacy anyone wants to leave. But one of the things I think about is, I write about this person in the book whose name is Norman Mineta, who was a person who was incarcerated in Japanese American incarceration camps during World War II. He was incarcerated as a child. And he goes on to be a member of Congress, and he goes on to be in President Clinton's cabinet. And then when George W. Bush takes office, George W. Bush keeps Norman Mineta as a cabinet secretary. He moves him to a different department. He moves him to being the Secretary of Transportation. But he keeps him. And I found that really interesting because Norm was a liberal Democrat and George W. Bush was not. So I asked George W. Bush, why did you keep Norman Mineta? Because it's not like he couldn't find any Republicans to be the Secretary of Transportation, right? There probably would have been 50 people who would have been suitable and probably could get confirmed and would do a good job. George W. Bush's response is something that, I don't know, this phrase resonates in my mind. He said, there was no better servant for America than Norman Mineta. And he later went on to give Norman Mineta the Presidential Medal of Freedom or, whichever one it was, one of those big presidential awards. I forget off the top of my head which one it was. I don't know. I just love the idea that Norm did a lot of things, actually. This is not even the tip of the iceberg of all of the things Norm was involved in. But he was noted not for being the best Republican or for being the best Democrat or for being the bravest in battle because he was a child during World War II. He did later serve in the military, but the military awards were never his jam. He was noted for being a servant for America. That idea really resonates with me. So maybe if I'm lucky, that will be what people will say about me in the future.
Well, I just want to speak into that just a little bit to say that Clara Brown did not know the impact she was making when she was washing laundry and feeding people and giving people a bed to sleep in. And so the impact that we all make goes far beyond what we can see, but especially in the work that you have and are doing. I definitely believe that you're playing a role in shaping conversations and how we see each other and guiding us as a lead voice that is of love and peace and humanity. And so I have just a couple of more questions for you as we wrap up, and they're a little looser. And so I am curious though, which of the 12 people in your book did you connect with the most and like you just could not get enough of as you were studying and researching their life?
Yeah, I love them all for different reasons. I have an affinity for each one of them in the same way that you would have for each of your own children, right? You have an affinity for them that's different. My affinity for each of them is different. But sometimes if you have multiple children, you have one child with whom your personality meshes more easily. It doesn't mean you love them more. It just means like your personality and their personality, they're just easier. You get along more easily. And so one of those people that I feel like I would have been friends with in real life, and if I were to have like a dinner party, I'd love to invite them, is Septima Clark, who is a woman who became a teacher. She had a set of life circumstances that nobody would envy. People actively tried to kill her. She's fired from her job. Her house, like they catch people on their way to firebomb her house. Her husband is a liar and he dies, leaving her a single mom. So of course, as a longtime teacher, I always have an immediate connection to anybody who is an educator. But one of the things that strikes me about Septima Clark is that when she is fired from her job, by the way, she's like falsely arrested. She's fired from her job because she refuses to renounce her membership in an organization that is working for civil rights. She does not just then go on the internet and complain about people who don't like civil rights. Of course, the internet didn't exist, but she took it as an opportunity to do the next needed thing, which is, okay, well, I'll teach adults how to read. I'll help adults who are vulnerable because they can't read. Illiteracy is a vulnerability. It's easy to cheat you if you can't read what a contract says. It's easy to not pay you fairly if you can't do basic math. If you can't sign your name to a paycheck, it's easy to have somebody take your check for you and then give you the wrong amount, right? Like it's a vulnerability to not be literate. So she says, well, I don't have time to sit around not when there's so much to be done. So she starts by teaching people how to read. She teaches them how to write letters to their elected officials. She teaches them how to run for mayor. She teaches them how to start a nonprofit. She is responsible for moving hundreds of people onto the voter rolls. And then she starts teaching other people how to do the same. And one of the people that Septima Clark ends up teaching is a woman named Rosa Parks. And we all know who Rosa Parks is, and we all know the impact that Rosa Parks has had on United States history and by extension, world history. And so the idea that because Septima just kept doing the next needed thing, despite her external circumstances of being fired and all these other things, despite her external circumstances, her willingness to move forward allowed somebody like Rosa Parks to come along and be equipped with the tools that Rosa Parks needed to then help make tremendous leaps forward that are continuing to impact millions of people. And nobody today would look back and be like, well, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, those are all terrible ideas. Why did we think of that? We all know how important those laws were and how hard fought those battles were. But on the surface, Septima was just a single mom who was a teacher, who was fired. And what she kept doing was the next needed thing. And her next needed thing changes the course of history. And to me, those kinds of stories. So I have this personal affinity for teachers, of course. But Septima was not a person of means, a single teacher mom. We all know what that financial situation looks like. Not a person of means, not a person of family connections, not a person of prestige and power. But look at her refusal to quit, despite evidence to the contrary, despite seeing in the moment perhaps no improvement, in seeing things only get worse for her personally. Look at what her refusal to quit, how that has benefited all of us in ways that she could have never imagined. And she says, and I quote this in the book, that one of the things that she has learned is that she can work with her enemies because you never know when they might have a change of heart at any moment. And if that isn't a lesson we can use today, I do not know what is.
Yes. I love that. Oh, I love hearing more of your perspective, even on her. And I was just so fascinated by all of the people that you found. Like, I just pictured you in libraries studying, and the amount of work that went into this book is incredible. My last quick question, and just know that this doesn't tie you down to anything. You can always come back later and change your mind. But I always love hearing about like your favorite presidents, your least favorite presidents, things that happened. So I am curious because, you know, all of the governors, we are hoping that one day we will get to vote for your name on a ballot somewhere. And so if you could have a vice president, dead or alive, who would it be?
So I'm the president, but I need to choose a vice president.
Oh, of course, you're the president, Sharon. And you would choose the vice president, a person dead or alive.
It can be anybody. It doesn't have to be a previous vice president.
It could be anyone.
Oh my gosh. Great question. You know who I would choose is my husband, Chris. And I say that because Chris is always diplomatic, even when I'm not. He is great at making connections and relationships with people, whereas I tend to just want to be an introvert and stay home. He's always believed in me and supported me, even when I did not believe in and support my own dreams and aspirations. I even say in the dedication to the book for Chris, who has always believed that anything is possible and that I am capable of achieving it. And so there's really no better person to have at your side, right? But a person of intelligence and character who believes in and supports you.
I love that answer so much. And truly, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing with me, for sharing with the Connection Codes community. One of the things I absolutely love about your book is that as you're going through the stories of each of these people in history, there are other people that are introduced. And you don't just say their name flippantly, but we also get a taste of these people as well. And so for me, as I am reading that and hearing that, it just shows that even if the person isn't being highlighted, you're still playing a role. And that there are so many intricate stories that are happening and evolving. And Clara Brown could not have been where she was if the governor had not supported her in that moment. He stood by her. And if the man had not come to her home and said, no, we are going to make sure that you are able to be counted as someone that is a pioneer, that there were people that came in and that we all play a role in each other's stories.
Yes. The idea of a supporting role we think of as less than. It's not as high an honor at the Oscars as the lead actor or actress. We all, of course, have the opportunity to play a main role in our own stories, but don't discount what it means to play a supporting role in somebody else's. I love that idea too, that like Septima Clark has her own story in her own right, but she plays a supporting role in Rosa Parks' story. And Rosa Parks has her own main story, but she plays a supporting role in the story of, say, Martin Luther King. And so all of these interconnections are part of the connection code, one might say, that all of these ways that we are unable to foresee the true impact of until it is in our rearview mirror. We can't discount what it means to play a supporting role in someone else's story because it allows them to become who they need to be in that moment.
Yes, absolutely. And that today we are all in these roles and we are all making history as we are waking up each day. And so I want our challenger or our connection coders, the people that are listening, to be challenged with what you take away from this podcast is doing the next right thing and seeing each other not as enemies, but what areas can we work together in? What areas do we agree on that we can move forward? And also to not get overwhelmed by the big thing that needs to get done, but find the things that matter to you. So Sharon, thank you for your heart, your vulnerability, and for giving us an incredible book of inspiration and hope and humanity. And where can our podcast listeners find you? I'll make sure it's in the show notes as well, but where do you prefer they seek you out?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Sharon Says So, but you can also just go to my website, which is sharonmcmahon.com, and you can find my podcast and links to my book and my newsletter, and all of the things are just on my website.
Yes. Awesome. And please go and follow her and see the work that she is doing and the impact on history. So thank you for being here. And yeah,
I appreciate you. Thanks for inviting me.
Wow. I am going to be honest with you guys. I was sweating the entire time through that interview because, I mean, how do you react when you meet someone that you just admire so deeply? Sharon is someone that is a doer. She has made such an impact and really shown me how to see people well, even when you disagree with where you stand. And the way that she has led her community is such a voice of reason and love. And so I am so glad that she was here. Definitely pick up her new book, The Small and the Mighty. I listened to it on Audible and I love her narration of it, and also ended up needing to get it on my Kindle so I could highlight certain parts of it as well that stood out to me. It is such a story of hope and inspiration. If you are listening and you have not left us a 5-star review, please go ahead and just hit that button. We do a giveaway each month if you will screenshot your review and email it in. If you are on our newsletter, you could just hit reply, send us a screenshot of that review. You will be entered to win a mug or a magnet, one of our items that we don't currently have available for sale that so many people are wanting. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here each week. And I really do hope, it is my passion to have a community here that does see humans, that we are processing the fear and holding space for others and what they are experiencing, even when we disagree, to actually ask those questions and get curious about each other. That's one of our core values, is curiosity. And so please stay curious. And as Dr. Glenn and Phyllis always say, we do this because you need this, you deserve this. So let's do this.